I was someone devoid of purpose and drive. I wasted a lot of time overconsuming fun, games, and food. I would spend all day playing games like Rocket League and Minecraft, ordering DoorDash, and staying in the house for days at a time. It was fun most of the time, and I had a lot of friends in a Discord community, but I hated who I was. I didn't want to be overweight, and my value quickly became about digital clout, rank, and numbers. My ability to play games well was the value of my life. I was unhealthy, and I knew I needed to change. I read the book, Atomic Habits, and challenged myself to live that life for 90 days, and show my transformation. I did it for 270 days instead. I gained positive habits, and rid myself of negative ones. But after 270 days, I slowly fell back into my old ways, arguably even deeper than last time. Because now I was constantly comparing myself to someone I never truly was. The Atomic Habits me was never who I was. It was who I was fronting to be. It's not that it wasn't helpful knowledge, it was, but it was incomplete. I was incomplete. I knew I needed to change, but I didn't know where to start.
It's this magical thing, purpose that we're all looking for. But what's funny about it all is that we need these things to perform. But we don't take a second to realize the purpose is always there. The purpose never leaves us because the very purpose is you. You are always the purpose. There may be another purpose, like being a SEAL or going to college or whatever, but the main purpose in life is you. So if you wake up in the morning and you don't want to do something, you don't care enough about yourself.
My journey took me to Osaka, Japan, where I studied at Kansai Gaidai University. I ventured into a new arc. Japan was my dream destination, and it gave me vast cultural insight. I was amazed at how Japanese people never seemed to break character. They were courteous, polite, and did their best constantly. They had pride in their collective way of being. I played basketball with children at the park. They would give it their all despite my clear advantage, always asking to play again and again. They wanted to beat me at my best, and I respected them for it. The elders I would pass on my morning runs, who were up well before me, tending to their gardens and yards, lived for reasons I didn't understand yet. When I went out to eat, the servers and chefs had pride in their food and service. My experience mattered to them. Not to mention the food was second to none I've ever tasted. I had no shortage of inspiration in Japan. Their courteousness and hard-working attitude shaped me. On January 3rd, 2024, my friend Mason and I ventured to Kyoto to see the Fushimi Inari Taisha, a place synonymous with becoming born anew. We crossed the many torii gates, climbed up the stairs to the dozens of shrines and statues, and we each picked a spot to make a vow to not reset to who we were before, to be ever changing and push to new heights. We rang the bell, blew out the candle, and gained another reason not to fall. When I returned from Japan, I started this massive self-help journey. I started to become the embodiment of hard work for the sake of change. I gained positive habits and learned from various masters, mainly through the medium of different self-help books I would read. With Can't Hurt Me and Never Finished, David Goggins led the way and gave me discipline, drive, and a way to change my narrative. My negative past experiences went from excuses to ownership. I villainized video games and whatever else I considered to be a waste of time. Through running, working out, and grinding every aspect of my life, I tried to chip away at the person I was before, the person I resented. I still didn't have clear goals, but I was changing and started running more often. I faced fears and insecurities, like taking off my shirt in public and talking to girls. I challenged myself to become comfortable with the uncomfortable. If I didn't want to do something, I had to do it. And with the various other daily habit grinds, like reading, writing, studying, and meditation, I became increasingly burnt out. I didn't enjoy what I was doing, and yet again, the person I was. I was working incredibly hard, but still, I wasn't happy. To make matters worse, disaster struck my family. My brother called me crying as I was getting ready for school. It was my dad. I knew he had cancer and things weren't great, but Zane explained to me that this wasn't just bad. This could be the last time I see our dad alive. I drove 3 hours away, in a hurry to the hospital and entered the room with my mom, nephew, Zane, and my dad, lying on the bed, breathing through a machine, eyes shut, and barely alive. I was sad, but I couldn't express it. Maybe I was holding it together for my family. I didn't know. The doctor explained to me that we had a decision to make, to pull the plug or try transferring him to a new facility, where they would try to resuscitate him. We all agreed that it wasn't going to happen. My dad wasn't going to make it. The doctors pulled the machines, and we said our goodbyes. I held his hand. His hands had some warmth, and they were large, a lot larger than mine. He had the hands of a tradesman and a working man. In his last moments, I felt like his son. We all watched as the beeping of the EKG slowly stopped. It didn't feel real. I talked to my family and spent the day back home. But I quickly returned to school and work the very next day. I needed to distract myself, but I learned the bad habit of suppressing my emotions in the military. I cried a few times, but mostly I kept on the same schedule. It was my trip to Montana, my dad's hometown, and the family I never knew, that changed that. In Montana, I only knew my brother Zane. I had never known the great Crane family. Turns out I had more uncles and aunts than fingers and toes, with cousins to match it. I had a grandma for each crazy night my grandpa had, and a whole lot of catching up to do in just 1 week. And my trip to Montana was to celebrate my father, Mark, and my grandpa, Eugene. I took advantage of being at high elevation and ran in the mornings, and in the afternoons and evenings, I was meeting my new family that in 24 years I had never known. On the day of the celebration of life, at my grandma's house, it was the most beautiful day of my trip. I played basketball with my uncles and cousins, and I came out on top. We ate some incredible food cooked by many of my family members, and I loved every bit of it. The most memorable moment I had was when I happened upon a poster board made by one of my aunts. It was pictures of my aunts and uncles with my grandpa Eugene, and with them was my young dad. I had never saw him when he was younger. My dad was the oldest of his siblings. I kept looking at the pictures. I couldn't take my eyes away. And then it hit me. I knew I was about to cry. I walked outside, and I cried more than I ever had. My Aunt Lisa comforted me, and I spoke to her. I finally felt it. I had returned to the home I didn't know I had, surrounded by a big, loving family I never knew I had. And it was all because I was Mark Crane's son. I told her I'd wished he was here to see it. I wanted him to see how happy I was to be with my family for the first time. The death of my father still hits me today, and it reminds me how precious and limited our time is with the people we love. I didn't get to choose to lose my father when I was young, but I can choose what that means to me moving forward. Another thing I realized is someone is only dead when they are forgotten. My dad is the one who got me on the path of becoming an artist and storyteller. His skills in art and creativity passed on to my passion and my love for it. When I create art, he lives inside of it, and that's how I choose to move forward. I didn't stop training, and I started to understand how much creativity really mattered to me. After Montana, I went to Austria for a few weeks to see my friend Gabe, whom I had known for a long time online. His house was over 300 years old, surrounded by farms and encapsulated by a small village. In the heat of July, we slept in the guest rooms. It took some getting used to. I came to Austria with my friend Mason. For 2 weeks, we fit in what we could. We went all over Linz and Vienna, including seeing St. Stephen's Cathedral, the Prater Amusement Park, and multiple historic castles. It was like living in a different time. I'd never been inside castles and around swords and armor. It was surreal. The Austrian culture was also enjoyable. Everyone was more outgoing, and there was no BSing. Everyone was open and brutally honest. From Gabe's family to the people we met along the trip. The way people acted was straightforward, cutting right to the point. I remember we played games at the dinner table with Gabe's family one night, and Gabe's dad asked me personal question after personal question. He never held back, and was sincere in every single response, even asking about my father and relating it to his family. I appreciated how earnest, honest, and hosting my Austrian family was, and it was a lesson in caring less about what people think of you. Japan, Montana, and Austria were similar to the self-help books I was reading. They provided an outlet for what I read in the books to practice and develop further. And in that same way, they were similar to the books because I was learning things through my own experiences as well. After Austria came the time to do my first running races. I ran a 10K race in Valdez, North Carolina. That was my first training race for the next jump, a half marathon. I ran this one in Boone, North Carolina, finishing at 1 hour, 56 minutes, and 45 seconds. After I completed the half, the door of possibilities swung wide open. The next step was a marathon. Mason and I found that the best course would be in the city of Oaks, Raleigh, North Carolina. We set the date and began training for the longest race of our lives. Mason had researched the best way to train for a marathon and shared the blueprint with me. A perfect week of training was 6 days of running. That perfect schedule, though, was only about 4 of my 9 weeks of training. The other 5 weeks were mixed due to life and a biblical hurricane hitting Boone. Life will continuously change your plans. You must always be ready to adapt. I didn't have the best training camp I could have, but that happens. I was still going to race and give it my all. Every week, I got faster, slowly but surely. What used to be the most challenging run of my life, a half marathon, became my training distance for my long runs. My last training run gave me the confidence I needed. It was 18 miles in 2 hours and 50 minutes. After that, I was ready. My parents took me to Raleigh on Sunday, November 3rd, and Mason and I set off to run our biggest race yet. We had heard the course would be challenging with many hills, but the reality was worse than the rumor. We decided to run the course together. We had to manage our heart rate early on. We were running mixed paces, but staying around the 9:30 a mile mark. In the second half of the race, we picked it up. Mason found his stride, while I started to lose mine. My heart rate was consistently 5 to 10 beats higher than his, but we managed to stay together. It was a mile 14 and onward that our leg pain started kicking up a notch. If you don't know, your heart rate isn't the only thing you need to worry about on a long race. Your legs are your other problem child. My pain was increasing slowly, but it was manageable. Mason, though, had entered the race with a torn Achilles and a lot of knee pain. If you thought I was crazy, he's even worse. Safe to say, his pain was becoming beyond manageable. He kept at it though. It wasn't until around mile 20 we needed to make some decisions. We were running low on salt capsules, which help prevent leg pain and restore energy through electrolytes. He had none left, and I had 2, one for each of us. We could get more water and even goose snacks at fuel points, but not those capsules, perhaps the most crucial ingredient of the 3 this late in the race. He took his starting mile 21 after bursting out in pain. His knee was grinding and becoming his own personal hell. We walked briefly, and I wasn't sure what to do. I wanted to beat the 4-hour, 15-minute mark at the bare minimum, but the pacer was creeping up on us. I also didn't want to leave Mason. We had come all this way. We had a giant hill in front of us, and Mason told me he needed to walk up it. So I walked with him for a bit, and we talked about me going ahead. I told him I wanted to beat the pacer, and gave him my last salt capsule and a Jolly Rancher I had. The only thing I needed in return was permission to go. He gave me a nod and go ahead, and I was off. The wall occurs when runners hit an unfamiliar area while running long distances and plateau for a little while. I hit my wall at mile 14 to 19. By miles 20 and 21, though, I'd hit my second wind. After I got up the hills, I had little over 4 miles to go. I took my last goo, started running my fastest consecutive pace yet. I was averaging an 8:45 mile pace. I knew I couldn't catch the 4-hour mark at this rate, but I damn sure could give it my all anyway. As I ran, I contemplated the race and how I got to this point. The course's difficulty took away my ability to get a sub 4-hour mark, but it was never about the time anyway. This was my first marathon of many, and finishing was all that mattered. The last few miles were some of the most beautiful moments I've ever had running. There's something about running that far that changes something internally. I felt in sync with myself, and as the last quarter mile came, I sprinted to the finish. There was no time for celebration though. I grabbed my medal and a bottle of water and ran back the way I came. I wasn't finished. I needed to go back for Mason and finish with him. Without Mason, I wouldn't even be in the position I am to finish this race as strongly as I did. He helped me learn how to train properly for this race, and we started this whole journey and race together. I had to go back because not only would he have done the same for me, I owed it to him. He was close to 1 mile from the finish. I caught up to him and asked how he was holding up. He was at the peak of his pain, but I reassured him we didn't have far to go. He would have finished the race crawling if he had to. That's just who he is. All I needed to do was be by his side and help where I could. He drank some electrolyte water, and we finished the race how we started it, together. Everybody has a story, everyone has reasons to be kept down and remain the same person. I was someone who overindulged in fun. Then, I was someone who pushed myself to burnout. When life hits you hard, in my case, with the loss of my father and a hurricane, you start to realize that all this hard work or fun is nothing without balance. I was forced into a position where I needed to enjoy myself, but I also had to work hard. I found the middle way. It turns out both extremes are unhealthy in their own ways, but if you combine them and learn moderation, you will find happiness. Happiness is found through solving problems. I'm not saying you should go out and run a marathon, although maybe you should. What I am saying is, your story is not complete. You know my story. Now, I want to know yours. Who are you changing into now? Who do you want to become? There is always time to change who you are. The best time to start was yesterday. The next best time is right now. Good luck to you. Keep working. Your hands have stopped moving.